Where's all my soul sisters? Let me hear your flow, sister. Hey, sister, soul sister, better get that dough, sister.
Pardon me, sir, you wouldn't have by any chance.
Keep that mama lie down in Oval Room, running his life on the street. He said, hello, hey Joe, you wanna give it a go? Yeah, get ya, yeah, yeah, da da. Get ya, yeah, yeah, on the trumpet, yeah, yeah. Rio Lady Voulez-vous coucher avec moi ce soir? Voulez-vous coucher avec moi? He's fighting a boat, I will see you fresh and down. Boy, drink all that N.Y.U wine on her black satin sheets is when he started to freaky
Welcome back, viewers. It's James Kalm, your half-assed reporter, the pathetic, ragged old guy on the bike. We're in Chelsea here on a spring weekend. Cheim and read and try to get some pictures by Milton Resnick titled Boards 1981. Well, do our initial sweep over the installation. Well, this show is titled Boards, and as I understand it, a lot of this is some of the late work. Milton had a long career, and he was kind of a cantankerous character. Oh boy. Well, I'll read a little bit from the press release. In 1981, at the age of 64, Resnick purchased a stack of 40 boards measuring 40 by 30 inches after having finished 3 series of huge abstractions, planets, elephants, and straws in the wind, many of which took months to complete. Okay. Resnick's plan for these relatively small format boards, as Geoffrey Dorfman states in the catalog essay, was to use them as a means of testing whether he had finally understood something about what he had been doing all along. If this suspicion was correct, then he should be able to arrive at a much more rapid, perhaps in 3 or 4 sessions, at a completed painting. So, okay, these are all on corrugated cardboard, I guess wax impregnated. I'm not going to give you the titles because there's, I think, about 40 of these in the show. This is titled Straw. This is about the time that I came on Milton's work. I got to New York in '79, and well, I didn't really understand what painting was, but I was open to some new ideas, and well, I liked what Resnick was doing. Saying this is also his third show since the Cheim and Reed Gallery became his representatives of his estate. And I've talked with Geoffrey Dorfman. I think I've covered both of the other shows that Resnick had here. You can go back and look in the files. I think one of them was some of the early work, starting from the maybe mid-50s. This piece is titled Straw, 1982. Well, you can actually see the striations in the corrugated cardboard that he's painting on here. This is BRNDO. I think if you would come in front of these in person, you would look at them and see how varied they are. I don't know how much of that we can capture on video, but each one of these has a pretty kind of unique palette and even a different rhythm as far as the brush strokes and how many layers of paint he's working up and the direction of the brush strokes. And I guess in certain ways there's almost a musical quality to the action of the hand and the stroking the surface. It's kind of a rhythm. I think this is just untitled. There's a wonderful book, Geoffrey Dorfman, who collaborated with, worked with Milton for many years. I think edited a book. I believe the title is Out of the Picture or Painted Out of the Picture, something like that. And I think Geoffrey kind of edited together some of Milton's writings, also did a little history of the scene. Resnick was a integral part of the downtown painting scene, and he was a close friend of William de Kooning. They actually lived in the same building down around 4th Avenue and 10th Street. And, well, there's a whole school called the 10th Street School that happened here in New York between about 1948 and 1955, 56. A lot of the first co-op galleries were there. Okay, I'm not giving you the titles, but we're moving along. Let's just go with untitled. One of the things I think is interesting about Resnick is that a lot of the abstract expressionists like Pollock and Rothko and de Kooning were not in the military. I think Pollock was 4F. Maybe he had some kind of a psychological deferment. And, well, that's interesting. So you've got kind of a warm brown going into kind of a greenish brown. I think this one relates more to his elephant series, kind of the elephant skin paintings. Anyway, I think Resnick actually served in the military for about 4 or 5 years, and I think it's Irving Sandler actually commented and said that while Resnick was out there serving in Europe, his friends, the people had been hanging out with and drinking and partying with down around 10th Street, they were all becoming famous and getting shows. And I think it wasn't until 46, 47 that he came back, but he'd had, a major part of his young career had been spent overseas, kind of like Muhammad Ali being denied the right to fight because his refusal to be drafted. Anyway, Milton came back and fell back into the scene. And as I said, he was a very close friend with de Kooning. Okay, actually, this is a nice little suite, and then we get to this piece that's kind of a grayed out Prussian blue. I think Milton also had some troubles with just the way that he was accepted in the painting community, and I think Irving Sandler actually calls him a school of one, in that he might have been a little bit younger than the abstract expressionists. And he was a little older than the next group of people that came along, which were the action painters that drift into the pop artists and the minimalists. So he was painting and went through some crises, and then at some point, I think, didn't even work for a while, but then he got a couple of huge canvases stretched and rented a big studio. I think it might have even been on Broadway. And he started making a couple of huge paintings that, if you go back and check the Kalm report, you can see them. Let's go in the back room. I think also that Milton Resnick was Elaine de Kooning's first boyfriend, or at least he was her boyfriend before she met Willem. And then I know that Milton was partners with Pat Pasloff for years. Okay, as I said, it is interesting to note how there is a fantastic consistency, but within that there's a lot of variation, and yeah, you've got to spend time looking at these. Anyway, I've kind of read a little bit about Resnick and his whole idea about, well, I guess would be the kind of the beginning of color field painting or field painting. And this went along with the kind of trend with the poets and some of the other downtown cultural producers during the late 40s, early 50s, and that was a real turn towards existentialism and kind of the anxiety of realizing that there was no God, and so you basically kind of had to decide what was good and bad, what was moral, what was immoral, all based on your own ethics. And I guess that would be reflected in painting by refusing to accept a kind of central subject matter, or the kind of moral and aesthetic goals that painting had kind of provided a lot of people with for the last 6,000 years. And I think in a lot of ways there's a parallel between what Resnick was doing and other artists, kind of proto-minimalists like maybe Ad Reinhardt. And I think both Reinhardt. Okay, well, look at this group of triptychs. So the piece on the left is kind of tilts into the green. The piece in the middle is kind of a hot red, and the piece on the right is into more of a grayed out violet. Milton was also one of the founding members of the Artists Club, along with Philip Pavia and William de Kooning. And I think Reinhardt was part of the club too, and I know that you could probably go online and look at the transcript of a discussion that Reinhardt and Resnick had maybe in the mid-late 50s. And Resnick has said that Reinhardt kind of dug what he was doing, or at least he understood what he's doing. Okay, this piece looks like it's got sand or some kind of textural things that he's thrown in there. And like Ad Reinhardt, I think in the middle or early 60s that Resnick was rediscovered by some young painters, people with more of a philosophical and reductive idea of what painting could be. This is titled Straws, Oil on Canvas, 80 by 60 inches. This is 1981. So as I was saying, Irving Sandler said that Milton Resnick had to have a little asterisk by his name because although he was kind of part of abstract expressionism, he didn't really fit in with that group. And, well, at some point I think he realized that maybe that wasn't such a bad thing, and that in a way he kind of jumped over a couple of movements and went about creating his own very narrow, very strident version of painting. This is Time. Oil on canvas, 80 by 121 inches. And, well, kind of getting an echo of a Monet water lily, but some much more strident and maybe obsessive denial of any kind of readable image. Getting back to talking with Geoffrey Dorfman, Milton bought a synagogue on the Lower East Side, I believe it's on Eldridge Street, and set up a big studio there, and he had his own paint grinder, maybe a couple of paint grinders in the basement there. And I guess he and Geoffrey and a couple of other people would go in and grind literally pounds and pounds of paint. You know, when you're painting like this, it gets to be a little too expensive to go in and buy this stuff by the tube. So they were buying bags of pigment and gallons of linseed oil and grinding, and I guess Geoffrey could come and bring in his own pigment and grind his own paint if he donated some of his time to grinding some of Milton's paint as well. And so, well, being a painthead, we kind of get together and just talk about the idea of what painting means and the whole materials and touch and those kinds of things. They're going to be opening the synagogue, I guess, at the end of April. Let's see, it says the Milton Resnick and Pat Pasloff Foundation will open to the public with their inaugural exhibition, Milton Resnick Paintings 1937 and 1987. Okay, it's 87 Eldridge Street on the Lower East Side, where he died March 12th, 2004. Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up looking at this piece. It's titled Veil of Isis 8, 1985. Oil on canvas, 75 by 45 inches. I think that Miguel Abreu has a gallery right across the street from Milton and Pat's Foundation, has got a show of his works on paper, maybe late paintings. So I might try to get down there. Tomorrow's Easter, so I'm sure the galleries will be closed, but in the next week or two, I'm going to try to get by and see that show, and maybe we'll paste this all together. Okay, now this is a lot like some of the paintings that I remember seeing. James Kalm reporting on Milton Resnick boards here at Cheim and Reed, 547 West 25th Street in West Chelsea. We have made our way from Chelsea to the Lower East Side, down here on Eldridge Street. This is actually the future home of the Milton Resnick Pat Pasloff Foundation, and this is number 87. Theoretically, this building will be open to the public and begin exhibiting the work of Resnick and Pasloff and other artists later this month. In the meantime, we're going to run up to the Miguel Abreu Gallery. For a Milton Resnick exhibition entitled Apparitions and Reapparitions. Oh, we've come in right in the middle of a conversation.
He would start from that, but then he'd turn away from it. That would be like the way to begin, you know. You know, he would paint from a model, and he'd start, and then as soon as got going, he turned away from them all. He says, well, now I don't really want to see her anymore. You know, this is much better, I get much better results not looking at her. Although he would start with her, but then he'd turn.
Yeah, I just wanted to contradict you a little bit in the sense that that's what we're here for. I mean, my impression is that you saw the large, massive works of Milton's life as one period of painting. You call these not painting. And I think that you need a lifetime of painting to do works like this. That you can't just sit down and do it that long. And that because he worked with color all his life, he worked with plus and minus all his life, this shows up in these works. I just want to be clear about that.
No, he didn't consider watercolor to be paint. I didn't say this wasn't painting. I'm talking about, you know, he didn't consider it to have the dimensional qualities of oil paint.
Well, he was working with a handicap. You know, he wasn't going
That
to
too.
get up and buy a gallon of Terps and clean his brushes out, fuck around with that. He was just doing something direct that he could handle.
That he could handle, exactly. And I'm not even, yeah.
Anybody else has it, sir?
Yeah, I'm Milton's nephew, by the way, so to me, his life really matters as much as his art. And what Geoffrey said about how he was like bored and needed something to do with the rest of his life, I see these as him just saying, I'm not painting, I'm having fun. And, you know, like Beethoven, as you said, finished his great works and he still had some time. So Milton said, all right, I'm going to laugh a little because I'm in pain and I'm handicapped and I'm going to do fun stuff. And I'm going to try to psychologically keep happy by doing this. And I don't know if that's got the right mark psychologically, Geoffrey, or you think that...
I think it goes beyond judgment. I wouldn't say right or wrong about anything like that.
Okay.
It is what it is.
I have one thing to add to your commentary about how, you know, as an artist you work with what your situation is. And when Milton was a young painter and I was a baby, I asked him, how do you choose your colors? He says, well, it's by what I can afford.
They all used cheap hardware materials in the 40s and 50s. They really couldn't afford to go to the art store. And then when they started to get some money, then they started buying better pigments. But you know, you'll see a lot of those early 40s paintings and you'll see, you know, this little bit of cadmium red someplace, and that's their precious little tube of cadmium red that they have, you know. And by the time we get to the 80s, he had gallons of these colors. You know, he didn't have to think of it. He was released from the you know, from the art store. He was released from that tyranny of not having to paint. You know. So yeah.
Might be a good way to end. Anybody want to say anything else? Sir?
Yeah, it strikes me that some of the paintings are a lot of variety in the subjects and the treatment, but there's two formats. Some of the paintings go to the edge, and some of them he leaves white paper, kind of a built-in frame. And I don't know whether that has to do with the particular part of his journey that he made in that, or whether that's a decision he made while he painted them. But I don't know whether you can talk about that. Why?
It was a shock to me. It was really a shock to me to see these large pieces of paper with the painting in the middle, because he always spoke against that.
Yeah.
And he was always very critical about people like us and about painting vignettes and not getting the energy to go to the edge. He considered it almost a matter of honor, of artistic honor, that you push out and to the surface. You know, just like to Michelangelo was question of honor that you not stick a leg onto. You know, if you happen to run out of stone, you didn't take another piece of stone and make a peg and put the leg in. You know, it had to be from a solid block. And so, Milton had ideas like that. It has to be this way. So when I saw these big ones with the bare paper, it was really, again, I would return to this because that's kind of the theme of the night, is you always come around to what you hate. If you paint long enough, you're going to come across things that you always said you would never do, but now you have this time, and no one's really looking anyway. That was part of what he had said. There's no reason to do it or not do it, so you might as well do it. So it's just a certain kind of attitude, which you could call having fun. I mean, I guess it's...
Or late style, as we just
Or late style.
Could have been the edge of the table.
But you can still say that he imposed a kind of rectangle within the rectangle, so it is...
Yeah, it's true, but that's different still. Yeah.
He does all kinds of things with the edge of the image. Sometimes he'll do like a false, like that one has a false line for the edge, but that's not really the edge, right?
It never is what it seems,
Right.
I mean, he would say some things like, and you can see this in some, he'll say, if you end up with a shape, make sure it's the nothing part, and what's next to it is the something part. Talking about materiality, that what you expect to be the material is actually the emptiness. And he said we got a lot of mileage out of that idea at one time. And actually, it is a fairly productive idea for art. You flip things, but then when you get to the big abstractions, it goes beyond the But in the late 50s, that was a big idea.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to thank Geoffrey and Jenny even more than Geoffrey for agreeing to participate in this experiment. I hope it was worth your time. I also wanted to say before we end that, unfortunately, but fortunately at the same time, as you all know, the foundation, the Pat Paslov Resnick Foundation across the street is soon going to open. We were hoping to have these shows at the same time, but it's going to be now staggered timing. But at the end of the month, so hopefully I'm sure everybody here will come and see the show there, which is called Milton Resnick 1937-1987.
Yeah, we're going to show
basically
50
a
years.
survey of masterworks.
Yeah, we're going to get some real fantastic.
And then we're going to continue this show. This show ends at the end of the month, but we will have a kind of highlights of this show in our Orchard Street basement gallery during the month of May and June, at least, and maybe even more. You'll always be able, at least in the foreseeable future, to come and see some of these works, outside of this display. So thank you very much for coming.
All right, thank you. Okay, well, that was a conversation between Geoffrey Dorfman, Jenny Jaskey, and Miguel Abreu, who was the MC. Now we're going to look at the paintings. Now this show is mostly works on paper, and most of them are gouaches and acrylics and watercolor. This is the one oil. This is untitled from the Stroth series. I think Milton had 3 major series that he worked on for a long time. The Elephants, Straws in the Wind, and I forget the name of the third one. Well, there are a lot of pieces in this exhibition, and I'm not going to give you all the titles. They're all untitled. So you know what we're going to do? We're just going to walk down and look at some of these. I'll make a few comments. Squash on paper. Well, as you heard, they were talking about, I guess Milton was, he was getting pretty old, so by the late 80s, early 90s, I guess he was suffering from some health problems. They were talking about he was maybe challenged, having a hard time getting around. Squash on paper 24 by 18. And so they were saying that he started doing the figurative works kind of as a way of maybe meditating and relaxing. And, well, I was surprised when I started seeing some of these figurative pieces. I think they had a show of these works at the studio school maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And as I said, these are all entitled, but I'm kind of looking at some of these and thinking that make me think a little bit of George Rouault, the great French fauve painter. So this one is probably about 18 by 12. Looks like a female figure. Again, we've got Milton's grayed out, toned out palette, and it's kind of chunky, thick brush marks. These are probably 18 by 24, maybe 20 by 30, something like that. Well, I was kind of stunned when I first saw some of his figurative works. And the ones that I remember, there was a lot of them just had an X in the middle of them, which I guess would be a good place to start if you were beginning to do figurative things. This is a pretty interesting composition. You know, I hate to say it, but a lot of this, I'm thinking, almost seems to have some kind of biblical content. I wouldn't want to read too much into this. It's also interesting that Milton was such a kind of a hardcore, and I think he decided that he really wanted to be a real serious abstract expressionist and really dig into the whole idea of existential angst and kind of the death of God and the realization that there is no heaven. But they always say there are no atheists in a foxhole. So maybe when you start to stare death in the face, the thought of God or the comfort that you can get from some kind of a belief in something greater, and maybe it's not God, maybe it's just the wonderful rich tradition of painting figures, only goes back about 60,000 years that we know of, maybe farther. This is a nice, interesting, kind of coloristically juicy piece. Actually, this is kind of stunning. I'm also thinking about, there was a group of New York painters that probably were coming up about the same time that Milton was. I guess he was in World War II, came back to New York. I guess he probably spent about 5 years in the military, but he came back to New York 1945, 46, 47, and there were a group maybe a little later of people that refused to give into the trend, the fashion of abstract expressionism, and I'm thinking of Jan Müller, who was a great figurative painter, and also some of these pieces make me think of Larry Rivers. But yeah, Milton was a painter, and even if this is not oil paint, I believe most of these are gouache, he definitely had a feel for it, and he didn't didn't lay back. He didn't try to go with the light touch or anything. This is still his masculine muscular approach to paintings. It's also got an interesting kind of color tone. And looking at this work, it is kind of interesting to think what would have happened if Milton would have been painting figuratively from 1945. I think Robert De Niro Sr. is another local painter that was coming up about the same time that never went abstract. Okay. Here are some larger pieces. I guess these are probably 42 by 31 inches, something like that. He's just calling these compositions. It's got some kind of a architectural reading. And even though these are supposed to be figurative of some kind, maybe these are apples on a table or something like that, that just as a pure abstract composition, that's pretty good.
That's the one.
Now, I think these are landscapes. At least they seem to read kind of like a landscape. And as I look at some of these, it's so amazing. If you're an artist and you develop a reputation or even a myth or a legend that you do a particular thing, and maybe you do it more than anyone else or more emphatically, and then at some point you make a dramatic change, it's always shocking. Landscape, 1999. And suddenly you can start to see ideas, influences, maybe a lot of things that you turned away from early in your career, they start coming out. And as I think Geoffrey said, if you paint long enough, you always end up coming around to doing what you thought you hated at some point. This is also, I'm thinking, kind of the Bay Area figurative painters, maybe David Park. Landscape, 1999, acrylic on paper. It makes me kind of think of Kathy Bradford and some of her night swimmers. Above, below. These have also got a lot of Pettimetti, although, they were talking about his leaving the bare paper and the edges. I think that's actually a nice device. Space. Oh yeah, that's Prussian blue. Composition, 1998, 29 by 41. Now I love the way that he's using the cadmium reds, cadmium yellows, and then kind of blending them, mushing them into these tertiary grays, but there's always the little pedimenti coming through the scumble. You know, I've got a Milton Resnick book at home. I think it was from some exhibition that happened in Texas, maybe in the mid-'80s. And they actually had examples of his work from the 40s. And Milton was a very close friend of William de Kooning. I think they lived in the same building together. And of course, you can see the influences of de Kooning, but Milton always had a kind of a brutal, ruggedness, maybe a more angular approach to his compositions. You know, de Kooning always had a nice kind of slippery, curvy, sensual line, and Milton's line was always a little more abrupt. And I can see some of those forms from the late 40s, early 50s. They're sort of still there. They're coming out here in some of these pieces. It's titled Above and Below. Also, I just went and saw Twombly's show of drawings at Gagosian, and of course they wouldn't let me get anywhere near bringing out a camera, but Twombly did a lot of pieces that were kind of symmetrical, dealing with the breaking the spaces down into horizontal rectangles and little blips and blurps on the rectangle. The form of composition sort of like that. It's composition 1998. Above, below. Again, we've got our rectangles. We've got a narrow rectangle at the top with the larger one at the bottom. And yeah, these little pods. I don't know, that kind of makes me think of water lilies. In and out. 30 by 22. More of an architectural reading here, maybe something reflecting in water, I don't know. Above, below, 24 by 36. This is coloristically a little different than most of the other pieces. He kind of is staying with his mauve, his violets, but it's interesting. There's a layer of kind of orange, rusty reds underneath that, and then the violets are almost the opposite side of the color wheel. And even with his yellows, looks like there's on some of these he's got almost like a turquoise blue base that he's worked his yellows and ochres over. Okay, I thought this was an interesting piece. It's titled Space. Now, okay, so he's actually playing with the edge here. And yeah, those violets are very rich, very beautiful. We're just gonna walk down this last wall because they're getting ready to close the gallery. Okay, more rectangles. Well, I looked at this piece, and so you've got a pretty symmetrical composition, and then I was looking at this little incident down here in the corner, and I just was wondering what the heck that is. It's like a little... a rabbit jumped over the fence into the garden. Above and below. Okay, now this is the kind of composition that I remember seeing a lot of at the studio school show. This is titled X-Space 2001, so this is the very late work. I think he passed away in 2004. Okay, it doesn't get any more classic than this. Reclining nude. Acrylic on paper, 25 by 40. And here he's kind of reduced his forms down, and they are as simplified as some kind of cycladic sculpture or a fertility goddess, maybe. And, well, you can even get the kind of the shadow of a face. And, geez, Milton is kind of even a little, he's gotten kind of sensual. He's loosened up. Okay, I think they're coming to tell me it's time to close. All right, okay. Not forgetting clouds go away. You know the sky for a heretic is clouded. I leave it to you. Does art tell anything? Has the babble become uncertain? It was sad in the old-time loft. The Bohemian, a counter no one remembers, arranged on elaborate front. But it was paint that breaks through. Pigment defeated the will. And from that inspired beginning, the dishonest self was dislocated to hang on a twisted wire. That was a poem that was written by Milton Resnick and published in 1985 in Art Forum. So this is James Kalm reporting on Milton Resnick. And we got a little bit of a conversation with Geoffrey Dorfman and Jenny Jaskey with Miguel. You can leave your comments, criticisms, reviews, ideas, suggestions. Like this and subscribe, and as always, thank you, Kate. Whoa, sing it, wow, thank you.
We are the N.Y.U Mixtapes. You can follow us on social media at the N.Y.U Mixtapes. We have a concert on May 4th, location to be determined. Please follow us on social media to find out the location of that concert.
What was your name again? The Mixtapes. Okay, thank you.